My father always said, don't do construction, don't do construction. And I was like, yeah, screw you. You would see these beautiful buildings that people built, but then it was building based on ego or building on all different types of things. And it wasn't really getting back to the ROI or really drawing what the customer needed. Because a lot of these younger companies get caught in the race to the bottom, right? They just want work and they haven't learned to say no, right? Not every marriage is made in heaven, right? We're not the cheapest, but you will have a darn good product at the end of it. I don't think it's getting better. I think it's going to get far worse before it gets better. It would be me be able to tell the future. But outside of, I'm sure everybody wishes they could be able to tell the future for good or bad.
Today on the Inevitable Cast, we sit down with Jeremiah Landi, founder and president of Landi Industries, an engineering and product development firm transforming ideas into market-ready products. In this episode, Jeremiah reveals why most engineering projects fail, not because of bad ideas, but because of poor decisions, weak communication, and racing to the bottom on price.
Welcome to the Inevitable Cast. This podcast is sponsored by Inevitable Flow AI. We help architecture, engineering, and construction companies generate a consistent flow of qualified project leads using smart AI solutions. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, click the link in the description of the show. Jeremiah Landi is the founder and president of Landi Industries, an engineering and product development firm that helps transform ideas into market-ready products. Starting his career in architecture, Jeremiah has carved out a multidisciplinary journey that bridges creativity, engineering, and entrepreneurship. Today, through Landi Industries, he leads teams in mechanical, electrical, software, and fabrication engineering, pioneering a horizontally aligned approach to product innovation. Beyond running his company, Jeremiah mentors startups and students across Ohio, guiding the next generation of entrepreneurs to navigate the complex path from concept to commercialization. Jeremiah, it's a pleasure to have you here. I see that your journey started as a golfer in architecture firm and even took you into like animatronics before launching Landi Industries. Can you walk us through how these seemingly different chapters connect and shaped your approach today?
So back in the day, I was did construction. So I did a lot of electrical. So I did the union there. I did carpentry. And so that was pre-college. And then once I went into college, I said, like, how do I refine this? So my father always said, don't do construction, don't do construction. And I was like, yeah, screw you. Right. And so when I went into it, I kind of went through a bunch of different ways in college. And so a lot of what I was looking to do is understand how do you make the complex simple and beautiful, right? Like when we look at the iPhone, it's something that is, complex and yet relatively beautiful and looks relatively simple. And I did a lot of architecture, a lot of designing and that stuff throughout college. And so a lot of it was how do we take these really big problems and how do you simplify it in a way that doesn't overcomplicate things, right? I remember going through a lot of architecture or design classes, and you would see these beautiful buildings that people built, but then it was building based on ego or building on all different types of things. And it wasn't really getting back to the ROI or really drawing what the customer needed. And I worked in a construction company, so an architecture firm, close to you out in Colorado. So we did Left Hand Brewery, a bunch of that stuff. And my job at that time was to help architects. So I was not an architect. What I would do is it's go for this, right? Go for this, go for that. And I will work with them to do, back then it was original blueprints. So we did IBM, which I think's become Xilinx out on Diagonal. We did a bunch of different work out there, and it was really understanding the complexities and the nuance that come within the building trade and why some of the simple buildings turn out to be the most complex. And it's because of all the different contractors and everything that are involved. And that's eventually what led to my company was kind of witnessing and working within this industry and seeing different people coming together, seeing timelines, seeing cement trucks being delayed, or in one job site we had the halon set off, and so it ruined the whole job site. And so you had a lot of these things that you really had to bring together, and I think that's kind of what's gotten me here is being involved in the trade so much. It's not sugar coated too. So working with blue collar people, it's learning how to speak the language and communicating fluently, right? But yeah.
That's amazing. So would you mind like just drawing us for us a little bit what a day-to-day looks like in your life as the CEO of.
So I think right now what it really influences, I started my company about 11 years ago. And so I had to really sit down and understand what engineering was, what value-based engineering is, how to really get to the root of what customers wanted. A lot of my career has been spent either in the trades or, more on a white collar behind a desk pushing CAD. And what I really had to take a stock in is to say, look, like, why weren't customers happy? And so when I started my business, I started from that perspective. And so a lot of my time now as CEO is spent solving the harder issues. So we're in Cleveland, Cincinnati, Chicago, and Denver right now is where all of our customers are spent and where a lot of my employees, a lot of my time is spent understanding how to get proper employees, right? So talent retention is an issue no matter where you go. And then also doing value-based engineering is very differently. I'm not just looking for somebody that's going to push a drawing or a wiring diagram or CAD out. What I'm looking for is somebody to take the step back and ask those harder hit questions. We typically try to get customers that other engineering firms would probably say are difficult, but those are the customers that aren't really chasing price. What they're chasing is a good solution. So we want a customer that says, why are you doing this? What are you doing? And is more involved earlier on, right? So when we're designing or building things, we don't want a customer to just expect an end result. So a lot of my time is working with my employees to make sure that we are delivering the value that we said. We're delivering drawings or schematics or things that work in a way that works for our customer. So like a lot of drawings across the industry are just very hard to read, very cryptic. They have a lot of symbols. So we spent a lot of time demystifying that, working with that, understanding where models come into play. And then also I spend a lot of time with my customers. And so what makes us very different and very odd is what I get told all the time is that even though I run a 20-person company, customers can just reach directly out to me and I meet with them. I help them understand the process, what engineering is, how engineering is going to be applied, and then also work with them to understand where money goes. A lot of times you just get a huge budget as a firm and a customer goes, look, I paid you all this. What the hell am I getting? Or where did it all go? And it's helping customers understand those constant change orders, working with them to understand the value that goes into those. So you want maybe this item moved or changed, or we have to do a bunch of rework in that, and helping them understand the effort that goes into that based on a total budget. And I think that's also what came out of a lot of my early construction is really good project management. But yeah, that's a typical day to day for me.
That's amazing. Yeah. So it seems like you spend, as the CEO and owner, you spend your time at the right place by taking care of your customers, keeping them happy, and making sure that they're heard and taken care of. It does seem like as well, you mentioned this step back and asking the hard questions because it's very easy to, if you're just focusing on selling something, to if a client comes to you and say, hey, I have this problem and I need this solution, and then someone would quickly like draw up a proposal and say, here it is. But it seems like what you do, you take a step back and you say, is this really your root problem, right? Like, is this a symptom of a bigger problem, or is it the root problem? And then help the client kind of like understand where the root problem is, where a solution would generate more value than maybe what they come to you as like, can you solve this specific problem, right? And I think that also, that attitude, that also would communicate really well with your role as a mentor, that you mentioned to us. And that's what I would like to like understand a little bit more about this side of you is how has mentoring influenced the way you run your company today?
That's a really, really good insight in there. I think that when I started my company 11 years ago, nobody was there to help me. So I didn't really have a mentor. And we didn't have mentoring like we have now, right? So I participate in a lot of different entrepreneur programs. And really what my goal is to help people understand the new type of consulting, right? Right now, we're in a model called value based. So when I pay you, I understand that I might be paying you a little bit more or whatever, but what I'm paying for is the value of your time, of your talent, and it's less of a commodities-based approach, which is the older approach. You still see that a lot within the trades where people are saying like, "Hey, look, how can I pay this guy like below minimum wage to do this work? I'm going to fix bid it," but you're really not getting the work you want, and we're seeing that and home building across America. And so with the mentoring that I do, my goal is to kind of take a step back in these entrepreneurship programs, help them understand maybe if they are doing new companies to really say like why is my company different, right? So you're not just looking to become a cheaper value of something else out there. Anybody could start a drywall company that you're charging 20 or $30 less. When you start that company, you really want to understand what it is, right? So we're working with a company that was doing cement 3D printing and really help them understand the value based, how they could introduce that into their construction services so that they could drive things faster, right? It's this idea of you just shouldn't be cheaper, you should be better. And then when you show up as an entrepreneur, if you want to enjoy your job, you want to solve problems that you enjoy, right? You don't want to just be solving problems that are mundane, or some people just want to solve problems that nobody wants to solve, but you want to enjoy those problems too. And so that's where a lot of that mentoring has gone. And I think it's really affected the way that I look on my out life, because the reason why I like to give back so much is because it's a two-way street, right? So they say that mentorship is not only you mentoring them and giving them time, but them also asking you questions or approaches that you otherwise wouldn't. And I think the way that it's affected me is the tighter hand-holding of customers, right? So I spend a lot more time making sure that my process is about customers, that I'm able to sell right, because I'm asking these people starting their businesses, like, how much are you planning to make? What's your revenue? What are you going to spend it on? Are you going to have your own computers for your engineers? Or are they going to bring it? What's your business structure? And it's really affected me from a managerial point to take a step back and say, hey, not all the time is the problem with my employees. A lot of the time it's with me. Maybe it's how I'm asking questions or how I'm driving it. It's also really helped temper me as well, right? So I got two kids, and having children and mentoring really changed me in a lot of positive way because it made me really slow down. I came from the trades, and so as an electrician, I just got yelled at, right? There was no, hey, Jeremiah, like, can we take a step back and look at this? It was a lot of swearing. You do some Red Bulls and some cigarettes and you go back to work, right? And so it was understanding the toxicity. It's understanding generationally what's changing. So by mentoring, it helps me understand when I'm talking to an older individual at my company versus a younger individual, what their values are, how we bring them together, how we have the communication flow, and really how I focus on that. And I think that mentorship, I would say for everybody, is something I'd highly recommend, no matter where you are, because I think that the mentorship not only comes from the individuals, but the other mentors too. The amount of other mentors. So I have a mentor here in Cleveland, Ed, who has done wonders for me, and he's not directionally in the same industry as us, but he was able to really help me understand my business, understand the approach to employees, how he takes it. And he's been running his business for 40 years, right? So it's been really eye-opening to see what the other mentors are. And then also when another mentor says, hey, maybe you need to pull back. Maybe you're in a little bit too much. And really, if the mentee's not providing that introspect, the mentor is. And so I highly recommend it.
Amazing. Yeah. You mentioned something that caught my attention there, which was the value based business model. It's not about what you have to offer, but it's like what value do you bring to the table, right?
Yep.
And in that, I want to understand a little bit more about the business model of Landi Industries. Are you more of an innovation partner, or do you see the company more like a design consultancy or a full product manufacturer? How do you position Landi Industries in this scenario?
So when I started Landy, the idea is that you could come to us. We've done dam designs, we've worked with geothermal engineering within server infrastructure. So we've done a lot of really complex things. And originally I thought the idea would be that we would just do a consulting firm. So I came out of consulting hourly, give me this much money, you get that, and then I just keep running the tab until you say we're done, right? And that doesn't mean the project's done, but it just means, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then the idea is that we'd bring brackets out, so we do fabrication, welding, so you'd build some of these structures, you would ship some of these structures, and so it kind of feeds naturally together. And over time, what we found is that it really wasn't suiting customers, because a lot of customers, when they came to us, whether they're bigger businesses or individuals, right? An individual is handling way money differently than a larger corporation, right? They're just cutting a check, or an individual is paying you out of their pocket, right? It's their earned money that now you have to earn. So it's a different look at it. But what changed over time is that we stopped doing this hourly. We realized that a lot of it was a race to a bottom. So when we bid out a job, it started the conversation in the wrong place. So rather than them coming back and saying, "Hey, look, I noticed that you're doing this," they would say, "Hey, look, this guy bid, 400,000. You're at 450. What can you do to come down?" And it was more of they were expecting discounts or me to drive down rather than me helping them refine what the scope is or refine what it is. We don't do a lot of change orders anymore. So we do a fixed bid type of situation, right? And when somebody comes in, they have to know what they want. And then month over month, we work with them to help them understand cost overrun, cost underrun. The whole goal is to try to get as close to that number as we can and really to understand what the customer's price budget is too. So by doing value based, I'm able to say, hey, look, what if we move from some of the design work more into the engineering? Or what if we change electrical so we'll put more automations in, right? Or maybe we implement something that you otherwise wouldn't. So maybe some smart technology, right? That otherwise you weren't going to have a budget. But if you lose your porch, okay, or maybe the porch takes a slightly different form, right? And so we work with them to understand that, not to mention they see the timelines, right? So a
Right.
lot of things that we deal with are supplier based issues, especially in this new tariff realm, right? We had a supplier who went from supplying us almost the next day to then 3, 4 weeks out. And I remember the customer being like, "Hey, where's our delivery on this?" And I'm like, "Look, like there's nothing we could do." But because we were value based and not price based, the customer understood like, "Hey, look, I'm getting something worth it, and these guys are having the same problems everybody else has." So it makes you look more of an expert than just some guy doing the work. And I think this is what I see when I do my mentorship is a lot of these younger companies get caught in the race to the bottom, right? They just want work and they haven't learned to say no, right? Not every marriage is made in heaven, right? We've all been through our share of relationships. It's really stepping in and saying, this customer is right for me, I'm right for them, and moving on. And I think that a lot of younger people don't do that. They focus on dollars and not value. For value, you're stuck with me, right? So when we get married, we're in it together till we finish the project and we know what we're putting in. But in a cost base, you're not going to see that, right? Because it's all about T&M. And then also there's not that reliability, right? At any time I could get fired. And then, if I'm not paying my contractors enough, sometimes they roll onto other jobs, right? They're not making the money they should. So it's hard for me as a customer to hold on to them. And we used to see that all the time on larger jobs, right? When I'd work them, as you'd see these contractors rolling off and off and off, but you never saw the work getting better.
Totally. And I think it's not only like the value base that would like hold your clients like truthful to you, it would be loyal to, would also be the relationship you said that you strive to connect with them on an everyday basis, the transparency on the day to day, you said the timeline that they know what's happening, right? And if there is any issues or bottlenecks, you have then that relationship to rely on to explain what the next steps are for this partnership, right? You're truly like more like a growth partner to your client than just a service provider, right?
Yep. And I think the other thing too is it doesn't mean that the money's going away. So a lot of the conversations don't result around the customer being like, "Well, I'm going to pay you less because of this," or "What if I pay you more?" It's a mutual understanding that you're both doing the best you can, to your point.
Exactly. And when it comes to your team, you mentioned you have like you lead teams in like mechanical, electrical, software, all of these disciplines. And you also mentioned like a horizontal alignment between across the disciplines, right? And what does that actually look like day to day? How do you manage that?
So I did the whole PMI thing, so traditional project management structure and that stuff. So we are a projectized organization. What that means is that yes, we have the different disciplines, but we're not transferring people between them. So you're not going from a whole design section to then maybe a, CADing session and then into a electrical session. It's all fluent. And so what that means is that every project we pull the team members on that should be on that project. They work on that project and then they roll off that project. And from a customer perspective, it's pretty seamless. So for them, it's like they're getting a mini version of my company. So they're getting my wisdom, my knowledge from the 20 plus years I've been doing this to help them accomplish maybe a one time project, maybe a recurring project, maybe a project that they want to roll out to other people. And you're getting our knowledge, our ability to help you grow and know what you're doing. And then that's how we distribute the knowledge. What we found very early on, and what I found in past consulting, is that you're buying the consultant's problems, right? So when you hire them, it's like adopting a child or a new family member. They come in, and if they have communication problems within their organization, or let's say they have a lot of subs, and then you have communication, or maybe they're just working to a spec sheet, you're going to see that. And that prevents the customer from getting the best possible experience, right? And so then when we did that, that's how we landed on this structure, as we kind of went out to all these companies, interviewed all these different companies and said, hey, look, like projectization seems good. And then the reason why we're horizontally aligned is that we said, look, we can go out and use a lot of different vendors, which, don't get me wrong, we do work with outside vendors. But by having everybody in house, it's just you rolling your desk back and going, hey, Bob, can you come over here? And then you two get in there, and then the customer could be like, let's hash this out. And it's less of me be like, oh, well, I got to call Tom, who's over at the electrical company, and then we got to schedule a meeting, because you burn a lot of time. And when you hire us, our goal is to get the project done fast and well. We're not the cheapest, but you will have a darn good product at the end of it. And we will have taken the most efficient trajectory, but this whole overlap of allowing engineers is critical. And I've worked in companies that haven't done that. The other thing about it is that it prevents your GC, or the guy that's managing it all. He doesn't really understand what is going on at each of those companies. So by having everybody in-house as well, by having the experts here, then that means that we're keeping up with trends across all of them. So when you come to us, it's not us having to research, which yes, we still have to, but it's not as deep about newer technologies or newer implementations. We're able to say, hey, look, we're doing this across the board, and you already get a unified bill of operating, right? Or system of operating. So I don't have to go find a bunch of people to bid it out. It's now saying, hey, look, this is how we work. Here's how we go. And you just go. And it's not getting the training wheels back on.
From experience, I know every time we had an issue with a project that we had to talk with a certain discipline that we didn't have in house, let's say structural engineers, it was like a week time lost, plus money out the window to pay for someone else's time when they had availability. And it's just less ideal of a scenario for a client, because they ultimately you just lose on the budget and the timeline when that happens. And it does happen more often than we want, right?
I think I would almost say it happens to every project, right? I don't think I've ever been on a project where you haven't hit a hurdle and then everything goes fine afterwards. Typically, you hit a big problem, whether it's structural, whether it's electrical, something just maybe was spec'd out wrong, and then you run into a bunch of problems. And I think that, to your point, I think that doesn't work for, I would say, the customer or you, right? So, like me as the engineering firm, we're trying to do the best quality, the best work we can, right? And for us, just I see this a lot with firms we work with to this day. You'll just have meeting after meeting where you have 7 guys you're paying hourly to sit on these calls, and you're like, dude, we're still not doing anything. We're still waiting on this other guy to give us a result. Like, what are we doing here? So your point, then the customer's just watching that clock tick, and they're going, what the hell am I paying for? But
Can you share some projects, or like kind of projects that you and your team are most focused on right now?
I think right now a lot of our projects are within the water industry. So it seems like coming out of last year, there's a heavy focus on renewables, which is counter what you're hearing within the greater market. But with the electrical costs rising, with a lot of things rising, there's a lot of companies saying like, how do we insulate better? How do we reuse things better? How do we re-pipe better? Right. So we did a project with a large medical company a couple years ago, and that was their problem, right? They had something where, because they made drugs, their piping meant that they had to dump water constantly, because you couldn't have water sitting because it would build bacteria and that stuff. So we're seeing a lot more of these ideas on like, hey, look, either we're building a facility that has a lot of reuse water in it, or maybe it's a testing facility or a place that handles a lot of servers. How do we take this mass of water and make sure it doesn't get lost, right? When we think about data centers now, they burn a lot of heat. So all this heat you're trying to get rid of, and all this water. What if we could geothermally recalculate that and say, hey, look, we can now maybe move this heating from this large server infrastructure we're doing over here through an electrical system, right? Control, and then into maybe a building that's close. So maybe a housing development that needs heat, right? You're now becoming more efficient. And I know that a lot of people look at green as political, but it's really green is something that companies want, right? With data centers using more electricity, a lot more people are saying, like, hey, look, what about these wind turbines, right? So we get a lot of green projects that are battery based or electrical based and saying, like, hey, how do we take this project and how do we make sure that we could use our power more efficiently, right? We worked with a Generac competitor years ago to do that, where they wanted to basically control within a building when something goes down, hey, we want these rooms to stay up using newer technology, which was crazy.
Amazing. Well, it must be a lot to keep up with internally
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
make sense of these projects and drive your team towards the right direction and manage client expectations. I see that you mentioned that you've done the PMI, right? And you use a modified agile for hardware development framework,
Yep.
correct? If we can expand on that a little bit, and you can tell us how does that change the way physical products are designed and built compared to a company that is not using these methods, just using it.
I so coming out of the trades, it was a traditional waterfall, right? So like when I worked at that architecture firm, it was lay out the timelines, lay out your work break structure, like just massive timelines that are taking years to implement, and then when a problem came, you had bigger issues. So what we do when we work on projects, so we traditionally productize things, which is why we're in the innovative space. So we'll typically be part of the building process, but we're not building the buildings. Typically, it's water treatment or PLC systems that control complex items, stuff like that. What it is that you typically have a lot of changes that occur. If you think about any type of work that occurs today, very rarely do you start and the technology is in the same place. 5 years and the current age is literally like decades. It would have been back in the 30s or 40s, right? And so what we do when we're developing is something called the modified agile hardware development. So what that means is that we're taking physical items. So this originally started in software, and software is something notorious for you could just throw everything away, start over like very quick. And we said, look, when we build things, we're building physical products, physical items. How do we do this in a way to cut costs? How do we run smaller experiments? How do we make sure that we stay on top of things? And it's all about like a cost and communication driven system. And so during this whole process, that's why we communicate with the customer so much. We go, okay, we've done these drawings. Can you review them? Can we talk to them? And it's this constant feedback to say, like, hey, look, maybe you're missing this thing, or maybe we need to accommodate for this, or maybe we need to size up some of the wiring over here because, we need to future proof things. And then that's really why we got into MAD. And I think we were doing it well before the rest of the industry. I think it came around about 8 years ago, and we'd started doing it about 10 years ago. So about a year into the company, because we realized like if we kept the status quo, we were just going to be any other company and it was going to be a challenge to survive. We needed something that set us apart. And our communication was already one thing that we felt set us apart by really being able to be iterative on projects. That was the other thing. And to be clear too, all you could describe it as just waterfall with more steps, right? So you still have that fixed timeline, you still have what you're delivering in the bottom, but we kind of say it's like making a movie, right? So we're writing the script, we spend a lot of time up front casting, make sure everything's right, and then we write the script, and then once we start building, it allows, us to improv in that term. So we're able to adapt, we're able to change while knowing what our customers want and still delivering on what their intent was, right? If we didn't spend that time doing these frequent meetings and adaptations, you're going to end up with something that's wildly different.
Yeah, and on that topic, I'm curious to know, like, what are the common like roadblocks or challenges that usually delay or derail the development or this like iterative process that you mentioned, whether it's like technical, maybe financial, or like people related? Or what do you think are the main roadblocks?
I think the majority of our problems do stem from financial. So typically, it's still customers that maybe are running into money issues or something. We deal with a lot of first-time people, so first time doing anything. And within there, normally it's not like a business structure. When we work with larger corporations, they get it. They understand budgeting. You have a lot of money, right? And I think the other thing outside that is decision lockup, right? So a lot of customers we deal with, big or small, and this is probably the number two, is they're trying to do something that's new to them or new, period, right? That has never been done before. And so with that, it's understanding what decisions we're making, what directionalities we're making, evaluating as a whole where we're going. And for customers, it's often they're very hesitant to make that decision for fear of, not fulfilling where they're going or maybe missing the target. And so it's also working with customers along the process to educate, to make sure that they know what we know. They're not engineers by trade like we are, but if we can't say something in a common tongue and you understand it, then that means we don't really know what we're doing, right? And so I think that's number two is really that big issue of a customer needs to make a decision but isn't making a decision. I think one of my engineers jokes a lot that we don't miss project timelines that often, but when we do, it's because there's a decision that needs to be made and it doesn't get made. And to fall into the top three, I think the third thing that probably wraps around would be some type of technological change, right? So political or something that causes that technology to change under us and you have to do a large pivot. But those are very rare. And by keeping the timeline relatively short, you could jump a lot of those problems. We've worked on projects that are 2, 3 years long. And by the time you're like halfway in, you're already noticing technology changing under you.
Mm, exactly. And I think like you see that change, and maybe the clients see that change too. And I wonder, like from your perspective, what are clients asking for today that they were not asking 5 or 10 years ago?
It's a lot more environmentally conscious items, right? So it's a lot of, hey, when I use this item, is it going to have some type of side effect on our health, right? Like back in the day, lead paint was okay. So now it's a lot of questions around plastic. It's a lot of questions about future proofing and upgrading, right? So we deal a lot more with overbuilding for things like electrical, for infrastructure, for IoT, for monitoring. So we spend a lot more time with customers understanding the future and just being green in general. A lot of customers really want to be efficient because they're starting to realize, like, yeah, I could blow all this money and get something that's close to what I want, but at the same time, I'm going to bleed money over a longer period of time if I don't do it right. And then also, they realize that for a lot of what we do, since we're not building the house, we're building stuff in it or around it, right? Things get thrown in the dump a lot. So things get posted out. So a lot of our customers want to make sure that things can be recycled or that additional time's being taken to make sure that things aren't being put in that are one-time use, right? And I think that's going a lot farther now. We're changing a lot of the questions from what we had back in the day.
Right. Nice. And so you're not building the house, you're building what goes in it or around it. And that to me speaks a lot of like software and hardware development, right? And do you see like a convergence between software and hardware development accelerating, or what and if you see it, like what opportunities do you think that creates?
So I think it's interesting if we look at a case study like Moen or something. I think you're seeing the industry when they're making smart appliances for homes or smart applications in general. You saw a very tight fitting up until this point of people wanting everything to be IoT, everything to be web, everything to be app. Because it's very important for me to monitor things, right? So if I'm doing a large body of water, whether it's sterilization or whether it's heating or any number of things, LEDs are very popular, right? So I need to control the colors. The big thing is that I want to be able to, as a homeowner, change as much as I want, monitor as much as I want, optimize as much as I want. But I think that's across for all of our customers, whether you're an industrial or not, right? So we work with a lot of industrial applications. They have the same need as any homeowner. And so I think when we talk about this, a lot of it comes down to understanding what our end customers want, which is their customers. But a lot of customers I feel right now are getting tired with having a million apps for things, a million subscriptions. So as much as we did see that hardware and software coming together, we're seeing a lot more of customers coming to us and saying, hey, look, like maybe we already have an Eden system in place and we want to develop a new piece of hardware that could be used in tandem with them. So it's less of them saying, hey, we're going to develop our own product. How can we work within these ecosystems? And we're seeing a lot more ecosystem environments coming up where these larger, we're seeing it within the industrial space a lot, where these larger companies are saying, hey, look, how do we build a really nice platform that people could attach to? Where back in the day you had like Zigbee or you had a lot of these places where people could do home automation or like, plant watering, whatever they wanted. We're seeing a lot more of these stores, and that seems like where the game is. And really the disassociation of a custom website to a piece of hardware anymore. Because I think people are just worn out, right? I'm tired of having 40 apps on my phone. I'm not
Right.
running out of space because of kids' pictures anymore. I'm running out of space because I have all these stupid apps to control lights in my house.
Right. And one of the things like I often see some clients struggling with is they often have this app or software they use and they have this other one, and maybe they're not using it for what it was designed for, but it fits some of their needs, and this one fits other their needs, but they don't really talk with each other.
Yeah.
So then you are stuck or your team is stuck doing double work. If you change something here, you got to go and change something there. Do you see a lot of that happening in the day to day, or do you think like this is actually getting better?
I don't think it's getting better. I think it's going to get far worse before it gets better, just because I think you have so many, so the technology age that we live in makes it very easy to create products, just like we're seeing with housing and all this stuff. So what you're seeing is a lot of racing to get things done. So when people go and want to create IoT products, whether it is for the home consumer or wherever, what you're seeing a lot of people is just saying, hey, look, it's quicker and cheaper for me to build my own thing than it is for me to play with other people. And so because of that, and because technology is so available to the younger generation, you're not having these people that, so if somebody's developing a new product for a home, more than likely they haven't been a homeowner before, right? So they're not going to know the pitfalls of this. So you have all these people still developing this. I think probably give it another 10, 20 years out, you'll kind of see the roll-ups occurring where you'll start seeing more alignment in these different processes. So like with Moen's like water gate system, you'll see that tied in with some of these other water systems or lock systems, right? So you're seeing like all these different thermostats like Ecobee now has cameras. And so this whole idea of like how are they going to become holistic, because at the end of the day, an iPhone can only do so much phone stuff, right? There's a certain point where I go, I don't need it anymore, even if I'm going to pay 1,000. So, I mean, I'd give it about 10 years and we'll see where it's at.
And in looking to the future now, Jeremiah, do you see any technologies or methods you are personally excited to explore in the next few years?
We are in a very weird space. So I think what's fascinating for me is that a lot of the middle range builders out there are exploring a lot of newer technology. We were just talking to a roofing company not too long ago about a project where they wanted to be able to do flat roofs better. So using the image recognition system in order to be able to detect when seams aren't aligning or ultrasonic, right? You now have computers that are in everybody's pocket. So now the technology is at a place where we could take these otherwise very manual tasks and roll them up. And I think it's interesting because everybody gets really afraid of a lot of this automation or that stuff going. I don't think it's really AI taking over like roofing and that stuff. But I think what it's going to be is it's going to help us do a lot of things differently. I know we were talking to a couple insulation companies about them finding new ways to insulate walls. So things like combining wood ash and wood chips from a byproduct of home building in order to provide a better insulated and fire rated material. Or they're looking at using some of these like NASA made materials around like tiles and that stuff they're using on the space station. What if we could take these and put them, these super gels, and put them in walls, right? So we're
Right.
seeing all this technology as we go now having cross application. So I think what I'm really excited about is this overlap of using computers to augment humans, not replace them. Because I think it would be amazing to be able to hold your phone up and be able to look at a wiring and then have the phone show you where the wires go, right? Like, I can't tell you the amount of people that we work with are my guys that have to wire cabinets and that stuff. And it's a very manual, paper driven process. But to be able to just hold up your phone and go, okay, this is where it goes and cook, like that just benefits everybody. So I think that augmentation with imaging is going to be huge.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, it seems like you've achieved a lot, Jeremiah, in the with Landi Industries. I mean, congratulations on all the hard work and the results you've had so far.
Thank you.
Um, if you could have like a magic wand and solve like one obstacle that's holding you back today, what would that be?
It would be me be able to tell the future. But outside of, I'm sure everybody wishes they could be able to tell the future for good or bad. I think a lot of it from my side is as a business owner, I just wish I had a more unified system. So I mean, like as a lot of my customers will go, well, Jeremiah, you're sending us so many different documents, so many different formats. And the big issue is that really a lot of the systems out there, just like we were talking about earlier about software and hardware, they're just so disassociated. So like when we work with people, that's one of our biggest pain points where I wish I could just wave a wand and just have everything so that customers can view CAD files in one place and view electrical and really not have to ship things in PDF or things like that. But I don't think that's going to be solved anytime soon. And I'm assuming if somebody does solve it, I'm going to be paying way more money than I can afford. So I think that's probably where I'd put the wand.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation today, Jeremiah. Very insightful.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
That brings us to the end of this episode. This podcast is sponsored by Inevitable Flow. We help architecture, engineering, and construction firms generate a consistent flow of qualified project leads using AI powered outbound systems so they can grow revenue without hiring a sales team or relying on unpredictable referrals. If you want to book a free consultation, find out more, click the link on the description of the show. I'll see you next time.